All right, guys, putting. Nothing really more important in the game of golf. It's 35% of the shots that you're going to be hitting when you play golf. And yet, people don't spend close to enough time working on their putting strokes. Ultimately, what we want to do here is we want to work on your fundamentals, right? That's where we really need to hone down those skills to make sure that you have a functional grip, a good posture, and you have excellent speed and aim. Very basic stuff, but again, all of this stuff tends to get overlooked because people get in the weeds with their stroke. They get way too mechanical out there. You need to be able to be free and flowing and rhythmical and react to what we see, as opposed to thinking analytically, getting caught up in the mechanics of the stroke, which again completely eliminates any intuition, any athleticism. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's talk about the grip. Really, really important. The way you hold the golf club very much influences the way the putter head is going to move. After all, your hands are synonymous with the putter head. Most people grip the club too much in the fingers of both hands. And the problem with that is it's wonderful if you want to hit the ball a long way because it helps you create two things, leverage and rotation. But as you know, when you're putting, you really don't need either of those. We're not trying to create any kind of power on the greens. We're trying to create stability and control. So having the club gripped more in the palm of both hands is absolutely essential. It's a critical element to help you stabilize the putter face. So what kind of routine can we have that actually guarantees that you're going to be able to get the club in the palm of both hands? Well, most people don't even have a putting routine. They just grab the putter, go ahead and set up to it, look at the hole and whack it. They're not really thinking about this. And again, if there's going to be any thinking with putting, it ought to be focused prior to hitting the putt. That's what we really want to be doing. Most people are spending too much time thinking when they're over the putt. They don't put any thought into how to set up to it. All that thought and analysis is going into the stroke. That's the last thing you want to do. So you need to switch that, guys. Put your thought process into setting up really, really effectively. And then when you're over the ball, go ahead and just swing that putter freely. The way you stand to the golf ball, your ball position, your weight distribution, your distance from the golf ball, these are all things that are going to influence not just the putter face, but the shape of the putting stroke. So let's talk about this for a second. If I go ahead and grip the golf club just like this in the fingers, you're going to notice if I do that, there's a pretty substantial angle that's formed between my lead arm and the shaft. If I lift the club in the air here, you can see when my left arm is parallel to the ground here, the golf club is pointing up at the sky. And that's the last thing we want, okay? So how can we do this? Well, if we go ahead and just hold the club in the trail hand here, I go ahead and point the golf club pretty much at my sternum, not at my stomach. I'm going to bring it up to my sternum so it's parallel to the ground. And then I'm going to go ahead and place the club in my hand. It's almost impossible here to put it in the fingers now without raising this shoulder in a very uncomfortable and awkward position. So just make sure that your shoulders kind of relax. It naturally seats itself into the palm of the left hand. So I'm going to get in here a little bit closer and show you that one more time. So you can see here, I go ahead and hold the golf club, take my hand, and then I place it parallel to the ground. So now the shaft and my forearm are on the same plane. I can't really hinge my wrists very much at all. There's not a lot of play in my wrists as I move the club into radial and ulnar deviation. That's that up and down motion. I've really limited that. And I've really also limited my ability to rotate the face. If we put it in the palm of the left hand, and then we just grab the club like most people do and put it in the fingers of the right hand, and here we are, we're in the fingers, it gets the shoulders very, very open. So you've got to make sure that your right hand is in an equal and opposite position. Again, it's placed in the palm of the right hand or your trail hand, just like it's placed in the palm of your lead hand. It naturally orients the elbows towards your hips. And that's what we want. We want to feel a connection here between your arms and the upper part of your body. I'm going to have a little bit of break in my arms. I don't want to have my arms completely locked. I'm going to go ahead and just bring those arms towards me. Once I get my elbows tucked in, what I'm going to do here is, just to play it really safe, I'm going to go ahead and even tip that club a little bit more down away from me. My eyes are going to be on the inside of the golf ball, guys, okay? Don't want to get my eyes too far over the golf ball. That's going to have me have a stroke that's going to be way too far outside in. I mean, my hands can only go one place, and that's going to be out. My hands are hanging pretty much directly underneath my shoulders. If I go ahead and get too far from the ball and I allow my arms to hang, of course, they're going to drop way inside over here. if I get too close to it and my arms hang, they're going to hang on the opposite side of the shaft. So that's a good way of testing to make sure you're the right distance from the golf ball. And then again, we want to make sure that the hips are above your ankles here. Okay, we don't want to sit back on the heels too much, and we don't want to get our hips above our toes. Now we're teeter-tottering here. We're going to be in all sorts of trouble. People always say to me, do you stick the ball in your stance? Well, I don't think there's any one perfect position to put a golf ball in your stance. I've looked at a lot of great players over the years. They're certainly not placing it in exactly the same position in the stance, but what they all seem to do is place it in a very similar position relative to their sternum or their swing center. So look at that as either your nose or your sternum, okay, when I go ahead and set up to it. So you've got a lot of putters that tend to put the ball a lot further forward, maybe opposite their lead toe, and one would say, well, that's way too far forward. I mean, I'm going to be hitting up on the ball way too much. Well, not if you take your swing center and you move it way forward. Now you can see my matchup is actually pretty good here, okay? So you can see that my sternum is just a little bit behind the golf ball. We want to be ascending, maybe 2 or 3 degrees. The worst thing you can do is have it too far back in your stance. Having said that, if you prefer to play the ball more in the center of your stance, you're going to have to make sure that your sternum isn't out in front of the golf ball. You need to go ahead and have a little bit more weight back. Okay, now my sternum's the same thing, isn't it? Relative to the ball, it's a couple inches behind the golf ball. I'm more in favor of stabilizing the stroke by getting you moving into and feeling a little bit more pressure on your lead leg in the direction you're hitting the putt. Makes sense, right? I don't want to have people falling back and losing ground and backing up when they putt. So I'm a little bit more in favor of having that weight forward, okay? I would say 60%. Just go ahead and engage that lead leg. It stabilizes the stroke. And then the ball position, I would place it probably 2 to 3 inches inside your lead heels. You're in a position now where just making the stroke, you're going to be naturally ascending as we come in here. We want the putter ascending just a couple of 3 degrees. It needs to be working up a little bit just to get that ball rolling here, head over toe, okay? What we don't want to be doing is hitting down on the golf ball. You're going to be hitting across it. If you do that, that's definitely not going to help. All right, it's time to start talking about the putting stroke itself. Remember, I said a lot of the thinking happens over the ball, unfortunately, for most golfers. They've got about 5 things going on in their head with how they should take it back straight, push their hands towards the target, keep their wrists really dead quiet. I mean, it's amazing. I've asked people that have taken putting lessons with me, you know, how many thoughts you have over the ball. And it's like, it's not even 2, it's sometimes 3, it's 4. You're basically toast before you even get started. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting you guys thinking probably initially way too much prior to hitting the putt, right? You're going to be a bit overwhelmed. Gosh, it's going to feel like it takes you 5 minutes just to set up to the golf ball, but hang in there, okay? Remember, I told you how important it is because it establishes good foundation, good fundamentals, influences not just the putter face, but the shape of the stroke. You need to understand how the wrists work in the putting stroke and in the golf swing for that matter. The way the wrists actually work, because there's some good things for putting with the wrist movement, and there's some bad things. And we need to make sure we clarify what's good and what's bad. So my wrist can do 3 things. So we've got this up and down motion, we've got this sort of back and forward motion, of course we've got this twisting motion here. Most people, they have a lot of twisting in their stroke, unfortunately. That's what influences the face position the most. We need to have a little bit of play in the wrist. Any great putter or putter coach is going to tell you the last thing you want to do is sort of stiff wrist everything here. You know, you wind up taking it back with your lead wrist here, and the lead wrist is moving to extension on the way back, and on the way through the lead wrist is moving into flexion. That's the worst thing we can do. The putter's just not releasing, it's not swinging freely. Another bad movement is as we set up to it here, as you can tell, if I go ahead and match that nicely up to my forearm and bend forward from my hips, is I don't want my wrists moving up and down this way, okay? Now that's the problem with starting off down in here, right? We've got this angle here, and then as we go through, of course, we have this movement going this way, and that can have a really bad effect also on the position of the face and the effective loft of the putt as you hit the golf ball, okay? So that's probably the second worst thing that you can do with your wrist. That's why it's so important to get set up really good and get the club in the palm of both hands. Guess what? Keep the club in the palm of both hands. That never changes. Look at that. It stays exactly the same. So I hope that helps in terms of the movement in the wrist, because you can actually have a little bit of a dance going on here in your stroke. It's okay. We don't be stiff wristing it. We can have a little bit of movement as long as your lead wrist is moving here from flexion to extension, not extension to flexion. Okay, so I want to make sure that you understand that. So just make a few strokes and feel that on those longer putts. So you're going to free up your stroke tremendously. Let's talk a little bit about the body movement in the stroke, because again, I see a lot of excessive body movement towards you, towards the camera here. The reason for that is psychological. When people get set up to it, there's a tendency to try and see where the ball's going, very simply because peripherally, out of my lead eye here, I can see where I want to hit the putt. So obviously, as I hit the putt, most people get kind of anxious to see where the ball is going. The problem we're going to have with that is if I pull my hips and shoulders off the correct plane here, it's going to have a tremendous influence on the path and direction the putter swings. So we've talked about putter face. Let's talk about path for a minute. If I keep my elbows relative to my rib cage in the same position, and I go ahead and keep my head quiet and my hips quiet, I pretty much can't go wrong in terms of plane. I just make a stroke keeping my elbows in, and you'll notice here if I do that, you can see the hands just stay facing you the whole time, okay? So I don't have any rotation here whatsoever. My body is staying fairly passive, a wonderful drill. But as you do that, your elbows are going to feel like they're very connected to your body. So that's one of the best drills you can ever do in putting. I'll do it this way. You can kind of see this. So I'm going back and through here, keeping my head still. You need to look at the ball long enough to make contact with it for obvious reasons. We've got to make sure we hit the center of the putter here, okay? So when I go ahead and make my stroke, to look to see where it's going, simply rotate your eyes and head towards the target, okay? There's a big difference between me hitting a ball here and moving my body to see the ball. You can see how everything rotated around the corner here, which is a huge problem. And then doing the same thing and then looking with my eyes. All right, huge difference there. Okay, so you didn't see me twisting my hips open or twisting my shoulders open, yet at the same time I was able to see where the ball was going. I'm giving you permission to actually use your wrist a little bit. I'm also giving you permission to use your eyes. I've got no problem with you using your eyes to see where the ball goes. What I don't want you doing is using your body, okay? So that takes care of the wrist motion in the stroke. It also takes care of the body motion in the stroke. So go through those steps. It's going to make a world of difference.